Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Canam Missing Project. Got the right edition for a video channel. And yeah, I'm still here on YouTube. They haven't jerked me yet, luckily. And I'm happy to be with you again. During the last several days, I've had quite an education about some facet of the missing 411 research. And I'm going to share that with you later. Also today, I'm going to give you an email I've never given to anybody before. It just recently came in, and I normally wouldn't even talk about it, but you're going to hear it because I want you to hear it. And let's start right off. First of all, I spoke to you about chronic wasting disease in one of the last videos I made. And it is a very, very serious topic. And timely as it may be, the Montana Fish and Wildlife Service just put out a new bulletin. I'll read it to you. It says, chronic wasting disease was recently detected in a mule deer buck that was euthanized within the Baker City limits in Hunting District 705 by Montana Fish and Wildlife. Fish wildlife officials collected the deer after residents reported the buck was acting lethargic and was visibly emaciated, had droopy ears, which are classic symptoms of the disease. Earlier this week, the initial test came back positive for CWD, and the results of the second confirmation test should be available next week. We are awaiting a second test to confirm the positive, but given what the animal was symptomatic of, we are in the middle of hunting season. We wanted to get this information out to the public as quickly as possible. Just so people understand without looking at a map, Baker, Montana is located just about as far east as you can go in Montana, right near the North and South Dakota borders. CWD is a progressive, fatal neurologic disease that infects members of the deer family, such as mule and whitetail, elk, and moose. Animals may be infected and contagious for a long period of time, sometimes as long as 2 years, before symptoms appear. An animal can appear perfectly healthy and still be infected. That's why testing is important. There's no known transmission of CWD to humans. However, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends that hunters harvesting a deer, elk, or moose from an area where CWD is known to be present to have their animal tested for CWD prior to consuming the meat, and to not consume the meat if the animal tests positive. Remember that dumping a carcass is illegal. Carcasses, including the head and spinal column, should be either left at the place of the harvest or disposed of in a Class II landfill after butchering and processing to prevent spreading of CWD. CWD exists in the wild in several places of the state, including northwest Montana along the High Line, south central Montana, southwest Montana. FWP has conducted CWD surveillance and monitoring efforts around the state since 2017, including this year. CWD has been found in Region 7 previously. Now, there's a lot of hunters out there that have a real problem. I guess it's cognitive dissonance, believing this is an issue. And they just want to go along their merry way, killing and eating the meat without getting it tested and believe it's going to be okay. It's a fool's parade right there. It's really bad. I have known some people that have done deep research on this topic, and it is as bad as mad cow disease. It's essentially the same thing, just a different offshoot, a cousin of a different prion disease. Yeah. And right now, if this is right on the border, very near North Dakota and South Dakota, it's a guarantee. It's probably spread as far as 300 miles from that location. Even though it may not have been detected, deers don't care about state lines. And they migrate around in great distances and infect deer after deer after deer. So it's coming to an area near you eventually in your lifetime. Trust me. And it's one of those things that there is no plan. And I've read almost every state's research on it. They don't have a plan to control it. They're monitoring it. That's all they do. They go around and say, oh yeah, there's a sample here, yeah, there's a sample there, and yeah, it came up bad here and it came up bad there. They don't do anything about it. There's no plan. And it's scary as hell. So, okay. That was my bit about CWD today. Now, you know, mental health is a big, big issue to me. And I've told you before, you got to trust me on this. When the curtain finally falls on COVID, the real tragedy is going to be mental health and its effect on people, because it really hasn't been covered. And I really don't care what anybody says anymore. But when I watch our news and its refusal to cover major issues, I'm talking about mainstream media, when I'm at somebody's house and they have it on and I'm forced to watch it, it's amazing what they don't cover. And it makes me think about countries where the news is controlled. Russia, China, North Korea, Cuba. Yeah. Our media is very close to going that far, and that is damn scary. If you don't believe me, then I've told you before, dip your toe in the water on the other side of the fence than what you live on. I don't care what you've heard about the cable news channels, watch a different one every once in a while. Don't keep drinking the Kool-Aid from your channel all the time. Know what the enemy's saying. It might surprise you. Yeah. Well, this article came out in October 19th of this year. The title is "Demand for Mental Health Treatment Continues to Increase, Says Psychologists." As the impact of the pandemic on mental health continues, psychologists are reporting a large increase in demand for treatment of anxiety and depression compared with last year, according to a new survey by the American Psychological Association. Many psychologists also said that they had increased workloads and longer wait lists than before the pandemic. Quoting, "As more people seek treatment for mental health conditions, the demands in psychological practitioners have increased," said Arthur C. Evans Jr., PhD, APA, CEO. "Like many other healthcare providers, psychologists are feeling the same pressure." End of quote. More than 8 in 10, 84% of the psychologists who treat anxiety disorders said they have seen an increase in demand for anxiety treatment since the start of the pandemic, compared with 74% a year ago. Demand for the treatment of depression is also up, with 72% of the psychologists who treat depressive disorders saying they have seen an increase, compared with 60% in 2020. Other treatment areas with great demand include sleep-wake disorders, obsessive-compulsive and related disorders, and substance-related and addictive orders, a survey found. The number of psychologists who reported receiving more referrals this year almost doubled from last year, from 37 to 62%. Almost 7 in 10 psychologists, 68% with a wait list, reported that had grown longer from the start of the pandemic. With these indicators suggesting that many psychologists are working at a beyond capacity. These numbers highlight what we have been saying for several days and months into the pandemic. We are facing a mental health tsunami, Evans said. We need to continue to support treatment via telehealth, and we must invest in screening, prevention, and innovative interventions to expand access to various levels of care. The pandemic led to a switch in telehealth for many psychologists, and virtually all clinical psychologists continue to provide at least some services remotely, 96% according to the survey, while few have returned to seeing patients entirely in person since a year ago. That's absolute crap. While few have returned to seeing patients in person, what are you worried about? My God, there's people out here that need these services, and psychologists are hiding behind their phone and they're afraid to meet in person. We've been wide open in Montana for months and months and months. Get a grip, people. A greater number of psychologists have adopted a hybrid approach of seeing some patients in person and some remotely. What the heck? I've done the remote thing on counseling. It doesn't work half as well, in my opinion. my humble opinion. Get out of your rooms and see people in person. If you got to wear a mask, wear a mask. I'm not going to be wearing a mask. Okay, enough of the tirade, I'm back. Nice Dave is back. New email here. I'm writing this email to share with you a very strange occurrence that happened to me this past Tuesday, November 9th, while black-tailed deer hunting on northwest Vancouver Island. Okay, let me stop there. I've been to the island many times, a lot for hockey, a gorgeous place. When you think of an island, you think, oh, I could traverse this easily in a day. No, you can't. No, you can't. And parts of the island are so remote, I doubt anyone has ever stepped on parts of that place. There's tons of wildlife, some of it very scary wildlife, and I have written about many people that have disappeared there. I would advise anybody to hike in pairs on that island. Now to the story. It was the first day of hunting season, and I had been away at work for the previous month in Vancouver. I was quite excited to get back into the wilderness for the first time in a year. The day started out a little late as I had to load the ATV into the truck and then fuel it and truck up. I was in the bush by 11 a.m. I was so happy to be back in the wilderness after the last month in the city living and working 7 days a week. The weather wasn't optimal that day, to say the least. I experienced snow, rain, and strong winds. Remember, always check the weather before you head out into the wilderness for any reason. At one point, the rain had soaked through my gloves and I was beginning to lose feeling in my fingertips. So I decided it was time to head back to the truck and reload the ATV and continue hunting from the warmth of my vehicle. Smart move. I spent the next couple hours on a Forest Service road that runs parallel to the north end of Muckalat Lake, north of Gold River, BC. It was now nearing 5 p.m. and starting to get dark, so I decided to head for home. On the drive home, I was reflecting on the day's events. Very content. I was just sitting back in the wilderness, enjoying the peace and quiet. I'd also seen a fresh buck tracks and sighted 2 smaller deer, so I was happy with the progress. My sense of contentment was soon replaced by a series of high strangeness that I'm still trying to make sense of. It started off with the most brilliant white flash I'd ever experienced that was contained solely to the inside cab of my truck. Immediately, I could feel every nerve ending in my body stand at attention. Nerve endings I wasn't even aware I had. I said to myself, okay, what the F is this all about? My eyes were now struggling to readjust to the dark road. My senses still electrified and on high alert. I suddenly became extremely tired to the point of almost not being able to keep my eyes open. All I wanted to do was close my eyes and go to sleep. I was struggling and I knew it. Scary. It was at this time that I began to feel a presence in the truck with me. Oh God, time to pull over. The presence wanted to pull me into their frequency, is all I can describe it as. This was all occurring simultaneously as I was still driving. I then became completely disoriented. I didn't have a clue where I was in the universe as I was continued driving. My eyes were growing heavier and all I wanted to do was go to sleep. From the onset of the white flash, the weather immediately became a storm of epic proportions. The wind and rain pounded the truck and the noise was intense. I had a feeling that if I closed my eyes, I wouldn't be coming back to this realm. At this point, I was fighting that desire with everything in me. A blue flash then occurred right in front of the right wheel well of the truck, maybe 6 feet off the ground. Seconds later, my strapped-down ATV shattered the back window of my truck. My disorientation was in full effect at this point. I had no idea where I was. It was like I was driving the truck through space. I knew I had to fight this off and try to find a reference point to get myself home. This was the hardest part. As soon as I would recognize a part of the road which I had traveled several dozen times, I would feel the pull of this entity again and lose my bearings. This happened 6 to 8 times in the span of 5 to 7 minutes. It was an ongoing battle I knew I couldn't afford to lose. Another blue flash appeared, this time maybe 50 feet off the ground and 100 feet in front of the truck. It was at this point that I began to regain my bearings and I was able to make the journey home. I arrived at home completely exhausted mentally, physically, and emotionally. I sunk into my leather chair where I remained the rest of the night. During this whole experience, I was too busy fighting this presence to be scared of it. It wasn't until I reflected back on the events immediately after and in the comfort of my home that I was scared of the experience. I can understand that. I'm wanting to know if you've ever heard of a similar occurrence in your experience. I've followed your online website and movies for a few years now. I've contacted you briefly on 2 missing persons cases that I've taken a keen realm of interest on. Took your advice to heart and purchased a Garmin InReach communicator. I never said to buy that. I just said to get a personal locator beacon. I've personally had some very interesting anomalies occur while in the wild, but I have never experienced anything like this. The intensity was off the charts. Hope you'll be able to provide some insights. Well, yes and no. I've read and I've talked to people who have claimed abduction by something. I'm not going to say it's an alien abduction. I'm not going to say it's a human abduction, meaning human to human. I'm not saying it's a portal type abduction. I'm just saying they were abducted. And what they remember is fighting the intense feeling that something wanted them to go to sleep. And then when they lost consciousness, that's when things started to happen, bad things. So, not sure if that's what was happening here. There's an old X-Files episode. And when I read this reminded me of that episode. Scully and Mulder are driving down the road, almost like a 2-lane highway in a forest. And all of a sudden things start to go wacky. Bright lights, car starts to shake. Mulder looks at his clock in his car, and when everything calms down, he screeches to a stop, jumps out, and marks the roadway where he's on. And then he looks at his own watch, and he wants to see how much time went past. In this incident, I would say, first of all, go back and mark that place where this happened. Time, date, weather. And then I would look at the weather reported in that area. And then, I'm just saying it's me, I'd go by and knock on a door or two of homes right in that area. I would. I mean, I've done all that kind of stuff before on all kinds of things I've researched. And I found people to be surprisingly friendly. I've been very lucky maybe, but yeah. Knock on a door and just say, hey, just experienced something very strange on the road in front of your house. And I wanted to know if anything like this has ever happened before. When you make yourself vulnerable, vast majority of people are very open. And you'd be very surprised what you'll find out about these conversations. When Angie and I were traveling through Idaho, I did this exact thing, walking up to a couple of homes so far in the middle of nowhere. Angie didn't want to get out of the truck. I had my gun, and she had the engine running in the truck, and she had a gun in the truck, and she goes, okay, if you don't come back in a couple minutes, I'm taking off getting the sheriff. I said, okay, good. And then each time that happened, the people were just overwhelmingly nice. Invited us in, told us what happened in that area to the missing people. It was really engaging. It was refreshing to know that so many nice people were out there. Which gets us back to the emails today. Next email. Dave, several years ago, my wife and I went on a short hike in the Smoky Mountains. The trail begins at the Noah Bud Ogle House, Noah Bud Budogle House. This trail is almost in Gatlinburg, just up Cherokee Orchard Road. So this last year, I was in Gatlinburg for a conference. And if you've never been there, it's a weird place. Really a nice town. People from all over the world are there because Great Smoky Mountain National Park is there. And the conference is, I think, the biggest conference I've ever spoke in front of. had to have been thousands of people there, and some of the nicest people I've ever met. So it was a great experience. And I've been to Great Smoky Mountain National Parks more times than I can count, because one of my best friends, Scott Carpenter, lives right near there. And we spent a lot of time working the park together. So anyhow, this trail is almost in Gatlinburg, just up Cherokee Orchard Road. I believe the trail is 0.8 of a mile in a circle with 1/10 mile markers along the well-worn trail. We were well past the 0.5 mile marker when we saw a deer in front of us. The deer in the park are not as spooky as in many other places, so I wasn't surprised that it didn't turn and run away. I was, however, amazed when the deer walked around us in a perfect circle, continued to look at us, and went back in the direction it came from. I would estimate the deer was about 25 to 30 yards away during this circle. The next part is very strange, as we have hiked that trail at least 25 times and we were lost. We could not find the well-worn trail. I told my wife that I know the road is to our right, so we took off in that direction and found the road. I was glad I was in a place that I had a good sense of where things were, or we would have been really lost. Looking back on it, it is as if we were hypnotized by the strange circling of the deer. So, story for you. I was in Colorado with Angie, and we were meeting some friends. A good friend of mine named Dennis Fohl. And Dennis is a super smart guy. That's Pfohl. Anyhow, we were kind of near the Flat Top Mountains, and they were camping, and we were coming through the area, and we met them there to fish for a day. It was late in the afternoon, and all of a sudden, I mean, this is the middle of the wilderness, all of a sudden, a couple of deer walked right into camp. I mean, within feet of us. If this happens to you, you be on high alert, because when deer do that, deer are very smart. They know that you aren't going to hurt them. And they also understand that a predator isn't going to come into that environment to get them. That's how smart they are. And those two deer, we all talked about it as a group as we watched these deer. They were on high alert, they were looking, but they knew it was safer around us than it was out there. And we didn't have any unusual sensations. We all had guns, and we thought, well, might be a mountain lion. It's definitely not a bear, but a mountain lion would sneak up like that. It could be something else. But that's happened to me a couple times when I've been camped in the wild. Animals come right up into camp and stay close to you. It's an odd feeling, because if you're smart, you know that danger's lurking out there. All right, next one. Hey Dave, I've been following you for many years, since your coast to coast days. Actually, I'm still on coast to coast every once in a while. Got to know you through the years, and since the passing of Ben, of which my condolences to you and all your family. Being a parent myself, I couldn't imagine what you've been through. Please know that your boy is now in heaven with the Lord. My thoughts and prayers are with you all the time. On a positive note, we have all seen what kind of compassionate, caring, and hardworking person you are, Dave. Don't let the trolls get you down. For the most part, like 99% of the community thinks just like you. Keep on trucking, buddy. As much as I would like to sit down and chit-chat with you about all the strange things that I'm sure we have both experienced, I know that in my 63 years of life, I've seen, heard, and been in some situations that I can't explain. Since first hearing you on Coast to Coast, I've always wanted to share this with you. A bit about me. I grew up in Hermosa Beach, California, and as a child was never exposed to what we refer to as the great outdoors. Don't get me wrong, I had a wonderful childhood, living a couple blocks from the beach, but once I was able to drive and had time off, I would spend weekends as much time as I could outside the city. My fascination surrounded places like the North and the South Fork of the Kern River, South and Eastern Sierra, and Yosemite National Park. In these areas, I've combined backpacked hundreds of miles, all with friends and a buddy, but never alone. One odd encounter in particular will stick with me till the day I die. It took place the last week of June 1980. Myself, 2 friends, and my dog that went everywhere with me. Weimaraner Lab Mix. The absolute best dog I've ever had. He wasn't afraid of anything and was with me through thick and thin. Great dog. We were backpacking at a Florence lake along the South Fork of the San Joaquin River. We never saw another person after the ferry ride across Florence. It being late spring, there were still patches of snow, and parts of the river were raging with solid white water. The trail was even washed out in spots. At the Paiute Creek Junction, where it runs into the San Joaquin River, we set up camp in a beautiful little meadow. It was mid-afternoon, and I decided to go for a walk, just my dog and I, so we crossed over Paiute Creek and walked approximately a mile until we ran into the Pacific Crest Trail. The forest was very thick and dark with much more snow. My dog was always coming in front and to the sides of me, but was always aware of where I was and would always come when I called. By now we were a couple miles from camp and things got real quiet. I mean unusually quiet. And I hadn't heard or seen my dog for over a good 10-15 minutes. Started calling him. Nothing, not a sound. I could feel that something was not right and kind of started to panic a bit, thinking maybe he fell through the ice somewhere. I was searching and frantically calling him, a bit freaked out. Then I started to hear a loud crying sound, almost mimicking a crying dog. The more I called out to him, the louder and more intense the crying became, until it actually started to sound exactly like a crying woman in distress. Whatever it was drawing me closer to it and farther from camp. I could sense there was some kind of evil intent. This thing knew I was in panic mode, and I was playing off of it. Seems like a good half an hour of this went on, and now it's getting darker because the sun was setting. I had a very bad feeling, and I knew I had to get myself out of there without my dog. I was devastated about that, but something bad was about to happen, and I could feel it to my core. So I turned back and made a beeline back to camp as fast as I could. Got back to camp, lo and behold, the dog was there. What a relief. If he could only talk, because I'm sure he saw whatever that thing was. I called it to my friends back in camp, and they just looked at me like I was nuts. If they only knew. Having read and listened to probably most of your stories, I'm not German, not that smart, and I was in excellent shape. So not handicapped in any way. Regardless, I consider myself a blessed one to have gotten out of it. The spot is not far from Dinky Creek as the crow flies. I think about the missing elderly hunter every time I pass by that turnoff. Actually, Dinky Creek in this area, I have several people missing by it. Something about Dinky Creek is not good. It's a beautiful area, as you know, Dave, and I've had other odd encounters in that general vicinity. Something is definitely out in the woods that I can't explain. The weird thing about it is these odd things always happen when I'm alone. Maybe there's a reason for that. Like you always say, point of separation. I think whatever they or it knows, I'm now in tune with them. Not so sure I really like that, but it is what it is. Thanks for taking the time, David. Wish you and your wife much love and respect. May both of you be safe. God travel. So I think anyone who's spent a lot of time in the woods has had an encounter like this. Honestly, if you're paying attention. I've said this before, and I probably don't say it enough. You're in the woods, you're on a trail. You are a fool if you have earphones on and you're listening to music. I'm sorry, you're a fool. We were given 2 ears, a nose, a mouth, and eyes to keep us out of harm's way. And we have an ear on each side of our head. Those sensations that you will get from those ears when you're in the woods are important, just like this man explained. If you're listening to loud music, you're on a trail, you're giving those predators a lot of opportunity. And I don't care if it's a mountain lion, a wolf, grizzly bear. If I saw somebody wearing headphones in Montana walking down a trail, I would stop them and engage them in conversation and say, hey. You just made yourself a whole lot easier to be food for some predator out here. Take those things off, please. I'd be very polite and I would try to educate them. And I don't care where you are in this world. Please don't do that. Next thing you know, in 2016, I was told a story about a local, this is a very interesting story. And I include it here because I've never heard anything close to this. And maybe somebody out there in the Krishna world or Hindu world or somebody out there has heard something like this. And I know that I have a lot of Krishna people that follow me, so. I was told a story about a local guy at my local pub, Lighthouse Pub, for which I can't go to now as we have a vaccine passport in place. Anyway, this guy for which I called Jamie worked for Waste Management as a garbage man. Although the profession doesn't seem scholarly, this guy was very smart and very well versed in history and also very insightful. I enjoyed talking to him at the pub many times. One day he told me he wanted to tell me a story of what happened to him a few months earlier before I arrived. I moved there in 2016, very beginning of the year. He told me the following story. One day at the pub around 5 p.m., he was talking and drinking with his usual crew when a man started asking people if they knew where Jamie was, saying his last name as well, for which I will leave out. As Jamie was quite a character, everyone knew who he was, and they directed the man to him. He approached Jamie and asked if he was in fact Jamie Blank. He said yes. He then gave him a bag which contained a woven blanket. As Jamie described it, quote, "It was a beautiful, colorful, woven blanket, something that would be made like in Mexico or South America," end quote. The man said he was instructed to give Jamie the blanket and that it was woven by an old woman in the Andes. Yeah, the Andes. Jamie asked why he would be giving it to him, and he said he wasn't sure, but he was instructed to by someone he didn't name. Then the man left. Jamie proceeded to wear the blanket and parade around the bar. Verified this with other people at the bar that day, as I was not there personally. They all saw it. Now, days passed. He received a call from a man in the Philippines who claimed he was a monk and needed to meet with Jamie. They agreed to a meeting place in Sechelt, Sechelt, it's in Oregon. A few weeks later, the man from the Philippines came to his house for dinner. He didn't dress like a monk, supposedly, but he told Jamie that he was ending his duties, and this was one of his last calls of duty. Not sure what that means. That's what the letter says. But he proclaimed after this he would be back to his estate, which Jamie described as lavish from the pictures the man showed him. Jamie asked, "Why do you need to meet with me?" And the man said that he should trust him and that the reason will come out at some point. Now, the most interesting thing about their initial meeting is that Jamie mentioned the fact that the strange things are happening to him and mentioned the blanket he got randomly by some stranger at the bar. The monk told him he must immediately bury the blanket in an unknown location, unknown to anyone else, and leave it there indefinitely. And it must be within a 1 mile distance of his home. Strange request to be sure, but he did it. He didn't even tell this then wife where he buried, although she did know. Now the monk also told him that the center of all male energy on earth is in the Himalayas, whereas the center of all female energy is in the Andes. He didn't elaborate much more than that. Weeks passed and he got a call from the monk in the Philippines, and he again wanted to meet. This time he was instructed to go to Hope, British Columbia. They got a hotel and Jamie brought his wife along as he was a bit sketched out in case this guy was just a nut job. But something pushed him to go meet him. They met and then traveled after dark to the river where Jamie said the man told him to strip down, and they performed some sort of purification ritual in the river. Jamie said it was the strangest thing he ever experienced. Freezing water, chants, and at one point he was bleeding from his eyes, he said. Crazy to say the least. After they parted ways, and the man told him that he will have problems with his wife, and she will leave, but it's for the best as she is not stable and will eventually sabotage herself. Sure enough, their relationship went to heck the next year, and his wife did end up losing her job. That's the last I saw of her, although I saw her a few times at the bar acting way younger than she was, drunk, etc. Now to this day, he hasn't touched the blanket and he won't tell me where it is, nor has the monk contacted him. But since those discussions, he also revealed that he's had many spiritual experiences with entities, ghosts, and spirits. And it's something that has always been a part of his life since he was a teenager. He also revealed that as a young teen, he had to take hormone blockers as he had too much estrogen, and the doctor was worried that he would stunt his male growth. If you saw Jamie, he's a big man, so I assume it worked. It's a weird story, I know, but for some reason I see it as being all connected. There's so much more out there, and I thought you, at the very least, would be somewhat intrigued by this story. As I can tell you, it definitely had me thinking. Thanks again for your time. Okay. I wrote him back, and I told him that there were some gaps in the story that I wanted him to fill in. And he did. And here's what his response was. Definitely some gaps in the story from a logical perspective, trust me. I've tried to piece it all together myself, and it's hard to make sense of it all. However, to expand a bit on my first email and to answer some of your questions. Tough to answer why someone would give a blanket to a guy he has never met. But all I know is the man was Irish and was living in Nova Scotia as per Jamie's description of the encounter. To why he left the blanket, he simply stated that he was instructed to give it to him, and he told Jamie it was made by an old woman situated in the Andes Mountains. According to Jamie, the man was first sitting at the bar and asked the bartender if Jamie Skeens was in the bar. The bartender told him that Jamie was sitting with a group of friends at a main table. Now, I forgot to mention, my wife reminded me, that it was Jamie's birthday that day. So that is something I actually forgot about until my wife reminded me. Can't remember how old he was. But anyways, I wanted to add that. The guy only told him that the blanket was made for him and that he was instructed to find him and give him the blanket. Again, this man appeared to have an Irish accent, according to Jamie, but living in Nova Scotia. So not so sure if he was indeed a Canadian citizen or if he was Irish, just staying in Canada. Nothing else was said to the man, and he left right after, according to Jamie. But I have no idea of what the connection to Ireland or Nova Scotia could play in this at all. Basically, all the man said was he was from Nova Scotia, had an Irish accent, and was instructed to give Jamie the blanket. He had no other information, and he left. The monk told Jamie that he had certain missions to achieve, and he instinctively knew that Jamie was one of those people he had to reach. Not sure, of course, how he would know that, but that's all I was told. But he was looking for a man named Jamie, and there are very few Jamies with the same last name. But again, not sure why he was searching for him. But what he did tell Jamie is that there are many of them similar to him who have missions to achieve. On behalf of whom I do not know. I would love to get you connected for Jamie for a call or email session, as he might want to add more to the story, but that's up to you. But I wanted to also touch on a few other things that you mentioned in my email. In regards to the imbalance of feminine and masculine energies, here in British Columbia in the last 3 or 4 years, especially since COVID, where it has become more noticeable to the regular person, young men are dying at an unprecedented rate via overdose, suicide, as well as complications of the vaccine. And if you add a strange disappearance of young men, that makes it even more concerning. I'm not sure if this is the case in the States, but likely it's following a similar pattern. Strange to say the least, but even more concerning is the lack of discussion or debate about the issue. It's like it doesn't exist. They do mention these things in the media, but they don't stress at all that it is 90% young men that are feeling the effects, which seems odd to me. It is odd. So I got this from one of our villagers. Now, speechless. It says, "Dear David, it's with a heavy heart that I found my 26-year-old son gone from suicide. I'm in shock. I am a loyal viewer of your channel. Nothing prepares us. My condolences for Ben. My son's name was blank. He was the light of my life. I pray he escaped from the pain inside of him." Psalm 23. I know a lot of us feel this pain, but until you actually are there, I can't even begin to tell you how horrific this lady must feel. And I didn't have permission to give her name or her email address, so I won't, but I prayed for her. I got that email, and then, damn, I get an email right after that. I'm going to tell you this guy's name. His name was Nick Weiss, W-E-I-S-E, and it's nickweiss@yahoo.com. Nick, N-I-C-K-W-E-I-S-E @yahoo.com. I'll read it to you just like he gave it to me. You think the state gets to take money at gunpoint if 17 Apollo missions plus Tesla missions plus International Space Station live streams can't film a star? No evidence of ever being in space, and you want to steal $5 trillion from the public? I know you think you're a hero. You are wasted. You have chronic wasting disease. You can't see that it's all collapsed. Your civilization is collapsed. Read the CDC study. They took mucus from a sick person and said it was COVID. Took said mucus, put it in a petri dish to replicate, and declared they found COVID. Problem is, isolating a virus requires taking that replication sample and putting it in a petri dish with human cells lines to see if it causes reinfection. Otherwise, they have no clue what they found. All of laboratory viral science is collapsed. It's all nonsense. Prions are nonsense, and you spout gibberish. Every politician supporting forced vaccination violates basic stand your ground laws in enforcing an injection on another human being. You are a mindless sentinel. Think about why your son left you. Maybe he didn't have heart to tell you just how disgusting you are. I would tell you straight to your face. When I called police because I had a Sasquatch group living on my property, they locked me in a hospital for 3 days and drugged me, you cohorts. When you regurgitate nonsense about prions, or you muddle data regarding missing people, or outright won't share it, you exacerbate the problem. You are the problem. Stop claiming to be a hero. Look in a mirror. And first you post about a beheaded Latino, then men near water going missing. It's cute, but it won't turn out as you expected. You are the aggressor. Steve Isdall is the aggressor in mocking those who study Earth curvature. You are the aggressor in supporting those who violate stand your ground and inject others with drugs. You are the problem, but you're blind. This is why your son left. You are the aggressor. I am the actual alpha, and I'm dealing with the bullies, you and Isdall. God knows it, and you know it. Read this twice. Nicholas Weiss lives in Vashon, Washington. I confirm that he does. Had a lot of emails over my day. Run across a lot of weird people. I gotta say that if somebody did that or said that to me, to my face, I would take everything in my power not to put my fist through the middle of his face. I'm speechless by it. One thing is, Nicholas has read me and my work totally wrong. In the back of almost every book I've ever written is a list of all the data from that book. And our analysis of what we learned in the book. That I'm against stand your ground? I'm one of the advocates for stand your ground. To take a shot at me, multiple shots, about Ben? What kind of person does that? Why did I read that? I read it because there are some other fools on this channel that think I make up the fact that these idiots write to me on a regular basis. I've never read to you one of these emails. That's the first one. It's one of the worst ones. Now, I'm going to block Mr. Weiss, and I purposely kept this letter from Angie because she would go crazy. She would go crazy thinking that somebody wrote that to me because she knows I'm having battles every day of my life just dealing with it. I actually took a walk today and I tried to imagine what kind of person was Nicholas Weiss. Never met the man. What would prompt him to attack me like that? I don't get it. Other of you have sent me other things that are out there on the web that have attacked me for no reason. And you know, there's people that do the research and they're on the front lines. And then there's people that do nothing but sit on the sidelines and attack others. I like to think that my original research that I haven't copied from anyone, I've not tried to replicate somebody else's work, it's original, that if I ever get to that land where I'm judged, that I'll be able to stand proud for the way I conducted myself. And didn't embarrass, humiliate, lie, cheat, degrade anyone in the process. But that was a tough one. There's been people around me that know of the struggles I have. And they all know the passion I have for doing what I do. They also worry about me. And they worry about me because dealing with missing people and their families 24/7, 7 days a week takes a toll. And every once in a while we have a win. Vast majority of the time we don't. There's been a couple of people who said, Dave, you have to live, you have to survive, you have to keep going. Maybe it's best to step away and let your research stand on the ground that you made for it. I thought about it. Because even though I've got hundreds of letters, probably thousands of notes from people, good people, great people like you guys, that have stood next to me and have supported me. Just to know that there are people like this in the world that actually took time in their life to attack me like this. So, move on from this. Several months ago, somebody here in Montana said, Dave, do me a favor and take a hard look at Native American disappearances in Montana. And surprisingly, when Harvey Pratt and I had written our first two books, The Hooper Project and Tribal Bigfoot, we had some of the best talks I've ever had with anyone in my life is when Harvey and I were in a room with his wife Gina, and we talk about law enforcement. And Harvey had a lot of insight into crime on Native American reservations, and specifically BIA police, Bureau of Indian Affairs police. Told me one story. He was having a conversation with a captain from BIA, and there was a case, it was going to court or something, and they needed to get the reports. And Harvey was talking to the captain. Harvey was working for Oklahoma Bureau of Investigations at the time. The captain said that he couldn't get the reports. Harvey goes, "What do you mean you couldn't get the reports?" It's the captain in BIA. Captain tells him, "I don't even know where the reports go. We submit them online and we never see them again." What? What? A federal law enforcement agency? Harvey goes, "Dave, I couldn't believe what I was hearing." That's what he said. How could you turn in your law enforcement report and never be able to retrieve it? Well, then we talked about the problems in BIA. I mean, the problems are, they're not understaffed. It's like they're not staffed. They have officers working 30 days straight sometimes. And one officer may handle a murder case from cradle to grave. And he said most of the time they aren't paid enough. They don't get enough time off. They don't have the resources to rely on more help when they need to help. When they're going to make an arrest, they said there's all kinds of problems. So with that in my back pocket, I started looking into a series of disappearances here in Montana. And I would say 19 out of the first 20 I looked at were classic drug crimes, alcohol crimes, assault. That if they happened in a big city in America, I'd say probably 95% would be solved. Well, on a reservation, 95, 98% are never solved because they don't have the manpower. And therein lies a huge issue. Now, President Trump started a Native American task force to deal with some of this crime. And they're slowly starting to make inroads. It's true. And it's very well, very, very needed. And what they need is they need to have insulation from tribal politics. You don't need a chief of a big tribe saying, "Hey, you can't talk to this man," or "You can't touch this woman," or "You can't arrest this person." No, no, no. You need to be able to go in and do your job. So they probably need to be away from BIA. But I've also known FBI agents not to want to ever go on a reservation. So I don't know what the answer is going to be. But the three cases I'm going to talk to you about, you're going to see right away the relationship to my work. And I was absolutely stunned when I started to research them. The names of these young ladies are odd because they're Native American names. And whereas in Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence, I wrote about a series of 99.9% men that vanished while they were drinking and then were later found in locations that didn't make sense. In this instance, it's all women. Now, the first case, the woman's name was Selena Faye, not afraid. 16 years old, missing January 2nd, this year, 2021, about 2 p.m. Selena led a rough life. A rough life. 16 years old. And she was allowed to travel from Harding to Billings for a New Year's Eve party. She and 6 other friends were traveling in a van back from Billings, going to Harding, when the van started to have engine trouble. Remember, I've talked about this before when people disappear. There's engines that fail, whatever. Well, this engine failed. And the person driving the van said, everyone get out. Everyone got out. Selena was mad because it was cold. And then eventually everyone got back in the van except Selena and her friend. And Selena was walking out into a field near this rest stop. So, this is the wanted poster that went out for her by the Bighorn County Sheriff's Office. Selena was last seen at a rest stop area along Interstate 90 between Billings and Hardin, Montana on January 1st, 2020. She left a disabled vehicle and was last seen on foot. Selena may use the last name of Ball or Big Hair. She has a tattoo of a cross on her middle finger. She has a scar near her mouth. Very pretty young lady. Now, different people and different things they're going to say. Missing January 1st to January 2nd. So, she gets out of the van and she walks into this field. Now, oddly, there's nothing in that field. This rest stop is in the middle of nowhere, a dusty prairie type location. But later on, friends come back because the people in the van told other friends that, hey, you need to pick up these 2 girls. And Selena's friend is at the rest stop. They pick her up, but Selena's not there. So what they do is they call the Bighorn County Sheriff, who calls the Highway Patrol, who calls state police, and a major search starts very soon. Now, this is the rest stop. This is Alkali Creek. 3/4 of a mile from the rest stop into the middle of this nowhereness is where she was eventually found. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, it's 3/4 of a mile from the rest stop, and they searched a 2-mile radius for 14 days and found nothing. They searched with canines. Bighorn brought in helicopters. They brought in FLIR. They brought in everything. And then tribal people camped out in this location for a week and a half, and they searched privately. On January 8th, the FBI put out a be on the lookout for Selena. What happened? How could canines, helicopters, ground teams, how could they all miss her? And then she's suddenly found in an area previously searched, missed with canines. They find her body. She has her purse. She doesn't have her cell phone. They do an autopsy, and they say she died of hypothermia. Sound familiar? How did they miss her? Or was she there? What would cause her to walk into the middle of this field? Now, when I tell you that Selena had a rough life, if anybody remembers, I've told you before that on these missing people, I'm very interested in if they had a twin. Selena had a twin sister who killed herself 5 years earlier. She had a brother that was fatally shot by Billings police. And she had another sister that was struck and killed by a car. You talk about a rough life. A lot of these young people on the reservation have no role models. They have no strong parental guidance. Some do, and some do great. But the ones I'm telling you about, and many others, do not. Drugs and alcohol play a big role in some of these people's lives. And that's the disaster of these stories. Next story, involves a girl by the name of Henny Scott, 14 years old, missing December 7th, 2018. She was last seen in Lame Deer, Montana, off of Highway 212. On December 7th, she was at a party. She's 14 years old. She was at a party and she calls her parents from the residence. Wasn't disclosed what was said, but she walked away from the residence, and it's in an area called Muddy Creek, just west of Lame Deer. Well, she didn't come home that night. There's a big search. So that's Henny. So she walked out of the residence and she disappeared. Number of searches. Many people looked for her. They don't find anything. Now, a week after she disappears, and 200 yards from the residence, guess what they found? Yeah, they found Henny. Now, this is a very rural location in Montana. Lots of thick woods, lots of wildlife. This is Lame Deer. And this is the muddy cluster road in the area that she disappeared. 200 yards into here, you're going to have grizzly bear, you're going to have wolves, you're going to have all kinds of prime predators. She's found 200 yards away from the house in the middle of nowhere in an area that had been searched many, many times, previously searched. The body had no injuries. Something happened at that point of separation. Her body was found, and it was claimed she died of hypothermia. 14 years old. What happened? Are you starting to see the similarities to my research here? Very odd. I read those two. And I dropped everything else I was doing. I kept going on the research. The next case, the girl's name was Kaysera. Stopsprettyplaces. Missing August 24th, August 25th, 2019, 18 years old. It's the girl. She drank a lot of alcohol. She had a public guardian. Didn't have a parent. She was going to high school at one point, and she was found so intoxicated at the high school that she couldn't take care of herself, and they took her to a hospital, and her blood alcohol level was very high. Well, she went to an area where, according to Montana law enforcement, she went to a place near Rangeview Drive in Hardin, Montana, where somebody that she called her supplier lived. Supplier, in their terms, meant a supplier of alcohol. Well, somewhere near that Rangeview area, she disappeared. And there was a giant search. They found nothing. And then they started to interview witnesses. They found on August 25th that somebody said that they saw her alive in this same area that they described. Well, several weeks later, a jogger is going by the area where she disappeared. Average temps during this time were between 87 and 54. And inside of a fenced area of a house, but next to a road, they see a body laying there. Well, this is the map. This is Mitchell Avenue. This is Rangeview Drive. Just north of Rangeview on Mitchell They didn't say which side of the road, but over a fence, they found the body laying in the yard. They call the Big Horn County Sheriff. They come out and they determine it's Kaysera. So goes to coroner, and they find out that her blood alcohol level is 0.149, which is very close to what it was when she was taken from school and couldn't take care of herself. There was no obvious cause of death. Death was listed as undetermined. Point of separation, alcohol, area previously searched, all of a sudden she shows up there. Now people might say, well, this is murder and somebody's killing these girls. Possibly. But you know what? All three of these cases that I just listed for you are not classified as murders. They haven't ruled out many things. In Kaysera's case, they said, well, you know, it could be this, could be that, but right now it's undetermined. Okay. In Henny's case, when they went to autopsy, where she's found in 200 yards into the woods, the odd thing is that there was no predation to the body. Now, if I drop a body in the middle of the woods around here, there's going to be predation. So why wouldn't there have been in Henny's case? And the coroner actually said that there was no little animals that ate anything off of her. Her body was in really good condition, like it hadn't been there very long. So what's happening? So you have three girls. January 2021, December 2018, August 2019. All very close to the same area of Montana. All very similar in nature. 14, 16, and 18 years old. But friends, here's what bothers me. There's one chance in a million that I'm letting my 14-year-old daughter go anywhere in the middle of the night to a party in another city. Not happening. Sorry, you might call me a restricted dad. It's not happening. And I guarantee she's not going to come home drinking alcohol. Somehow we've lost the parental influence on some of our young people. And I know it seems restricted if you're a young person and you're watching and I say, no, you're not going 50 miles away into Billings to go party on New Year's Eve. No, not doing it. But that was my way to keep my kids alive. I wanted them to get older to be able to make decisions on their own. I didn't want older predators taking advantage of them. I didn't want them to be given alcohol and have their defenses come down. Even at times when I read about young people, 14, 15, 16, in a big city out at 2 or 3 in the morning, and they're confronted by a policeman and they have a gun, what in the heck are the parents? Where are the parents? Do they know where their child is? They obviously don't know he has a gun. He's getting confronted by the police. I don't get it. Now I realize that some of these kids, I talked about some just now, have public guardians because their parents, maybe they're deceased, maybe they're in jail, in prison, maybe they're drug and narcotics addicts, I don't know. But they really, in my world, we're not giving these kids a fair chance. Now, do I think these were crimes? They're not classified as crimes. I don't know what happened, but they're very similar, if not identical, to the cases I wrote about. Missing 411, a sobering coincidence, except these are ladies, young ladies. And they trouble the heck out of me. So, those are the cases for today. I appreciate you being here. I greatly appreciate you supporting my efforts. And every day, that's one of the first things I do when I'm out in public is I look to do a good thing for somebody. And it may just be a small gesture, but it's a gesture. And I encourage you to do the same thing the next time you're out in public. Hope you have a great week.